YouTube. Welcome to another edition of Eric Flight. Today we'll be talking about V-speeds, how important they are, how you use them, and where you can find them for the aircraft that you're flying. We're going to focus on the Cessna 152 today, which is the actual aircraft I fly in my lessons. We'll also take a look at the Cessna 172 V-speeds, which are very similar to the 152. The 172 has a longer range than the 152, and I fly it on the simulator a lot to simulate what I would want to try to fly in the future with my family if I was to take a trip with them. Still trying to convince the wife though, but my kid's all for it. My 3-year-old wants to fly with Dad does, so we'll have to see. Still have to get the pilot's license, still all that stuff, but let's check out V-speeds today.
Hello YouTube, it's Eric. We're going to be talking about V-speeds. Places to find V-speeds. The ultimate place to find it is in your Pilot's Operating Handbook. Obviously the checklist is kind of a reduced version of that for when you're flying, so that way you're not flipping through pages in a Pilot's Operating Handbook. So we're going to use the Cessna 152 checklist. This checklist is available for free online. It is not supposed to be used for real-world aviation, from what I understand. And yeah, it's great for the flight sim though. I've had this is probably the best Cessna 152 checklist I've found so far. So anyways, eventually when you scroll down, you should find normal operating procedures right here, and it says airspeeds. Let's talk about the V and E at first, okay? So V and E is the never exceed speed. You never want to exceed that in the plane. It is basically the red line on your airspeed indicator. So if you go past that, it's not a good day for you. Usually means structural integrity is not going to be that good for you, and yeah, you could break the plane that way. So never ever exceed 149 in the Cessna 152. VNO, which is our next V speed, is the maximum structural cruising speed. So in other words, it's the maximum speed for normal operations. That is found as the end of the green arc on the airspeed indicator. Okay, if you are flying, that's the maximum speed at which you can fly in the Cessna 152 with a little turbulence, basically turbulent air. You'll also notice that if you look at the airspeed indicator, that it has a yellow arc. That's actually, you can go into that, which is basically, you can go into that. You just don't want to go in that with turbulent air or anything like that, because then it can cause problems. So you need smooth, clean, crisp, just flying with no conditions that would put extra stress on the planes, because then that's going to put a little bit more stress on the plane. So you can fly within the yellow. It's not exactly considered a great thing to do, but you can if you wanted to. All right, let's look at VA. VA stands for the maneuvering speed in the plane. So in order to maneuver the plane easily, they want you to fly at 93 to 104. Again, you can go higher than that, but it's going to affect the actual maneuvering on the way that you use the yoke. With the airspeed above that or below that, 93 is going to make it a little more sluggish. And if you actually fly in real life with a Cessna 152, you could feel that difference in the yoke. Either it's going to be more sluggish or it's going to be harder to turn. I've never gone exceeding 104, by the way. I've only gone below that to practice stalls, and it gets sluggish, basically. It's harder. It takes longer for the plane to turn on the aileron axis and stuff like that. So VA is your optimal maneuvering speed, which is basically where you want to be for level flight cruising. Okay, your next one is VFE. That's the maximum flap extended speed. Basically, it means what I just said. You don't want to have any flaps extended until you hit 85 knots or below, because you could damage parts of the plane. And so when you're landing, that's basically when the flaps extended speed comes into account. Or if you're trying to do an emergency descent, you need to not extend the flaps until you get to 85 knots or below. That on the airspeed indicator is shown by a inner white arc. Okay, anywhere on the it's on the green side, but there's like a white bar on the inside, and it shows you that that's when you can extend flaps. And again, you want to do that sequentially. You don't want to do it all at once, even if you're in emergency descent. So you want the plane to slow down gradually. VY is a major one that you want to learn if you're first learning how to fly a plane. VY stands for speed that will allow for the best rate of climb. So in other words, if you wanna get up in the air, this is usually done on takeoffs. You want to keep the plane at 67 knots, and that will get you the best rate of climb. It'll get you up in the air faster, and you want that. That's crucial when you take off because you want as much altitude as possible in case something happens. So 67 is what you're aiming for on knots, and you lower the nose down if you need to increase the knots to get to 67 while you're climbing, or you pull back on the yoke and you bring the nose up to actually make it go slow down to 67 knots if you're in a climb. And you just want to keep it right there, and they'll give you your best rate of climb. That's determined by Cessna itself. So all airplane manufacturers make a VY basically, and it's one of the first things you have to know. However, the next V speed, the VX, stands for the speed that will allow for the best angle of climb. So what that means is that it will let you climb the most in the shortest distance. That would be used for short runway takeoffs, or if you have trees or other obstacles at the end that you have to clear, and they're in a short range, obviously. You can go at 54 knots instead of 67, and it will still climb. It will climb higher, but at a slower speed. So it will go higher and clear the trees rather than VY, which is more of a compensation between forward speed and also climb up. So VX is used to avoid obstacles, gives you the best angle of climb. You can do it whenever you want to, obviously, but 67 is really what you're after, so that you get the most when you take off. All right, the other two V speeds on this, VS1. VS1 stands for the stall speed, or the minimum steady flight speed for which the aircraft is still controllable in a specific configuration. So this will be shown on your airspeed indicator as the end of the green arc. Okay, 40 knots means that you're going to basically be in the stall area zone. You could stall at any time at 40 knots, beginning at 40 knots, basically. VSO is kind of almost the same thing, except it's the stall speed or the minimum flight speed in the landing configuration. So in other words, if you have full flaps and you're landing, 35 knots is where the stall is probably going to start happening. And when you first learn how to fly, one of the first things you do, I mean, it depends on where you go. Some schools have a curriculum, some are part 61, which is the one I go to, which is where they make the curriculum as you go. It's helped me out because they kind of took into account what I did know, and they've tailored my lessons to that. But you actually practice stalls, and you do power on stalls, and you just put the nose up. You're about 3,500 feet in the air. You put the nose up, you bring the yoke back, and you reduce the speed in RPMs, and you just keep bringing that nose back, and around 40 knots you'll feel the plane just dive down a little bit. And what you want to do is just put the nose forward, give it a little bit of power, and then come out of that stall. VSO is like that's why you practice stalls, honestly, because VSO is like landing. You're going at a slower speed, you're in full flaps, there's not much distance between you and the ground, so it's a very dangerous thing. If you get to 35 knots, you have to land at around 60 to 70 knots to be at a good speed, safe speed to land the Cessna 152. 35 knots, if you're going that slow on a landing, you got to do something there. You have to push the throttle forward more or something, because 35 knots you'll be stalling, and you'll probably not make the runway unless you can recover from a stall, which is why they train you how to recover from stalls. So anyways, that was the V speeds on the Cessna 152, and that's what they mean. And I don't know about you, but when I was flight simming before my lessons. I mean, I saw V speeds, I kind of understood a couple of them, but I never really understood how to use them to the full benefit. Like the VY at 67, I mean, I would just look at the feet per minute, and judge my climb on that. But it's really done in the real world with the VY and the VX speeds. If you're climbing out of there, everything else is pretty self-explanatory. And yeah, so very crucial to know V speeds and to follow them, to use them when you flight sim if you want to be realistic. So that's how you get some V speeds off the checklist. There's more V speeds than that, by the way. It's just that those V speeds are the only ones on this checklist. If you want all the V speeds, you can definitely look at the Pilot's Operating Handbook, the POH, and it'll show you that. All right, now that we've looked at the checklist for the 152, let's look at this checklist I found online for the 172N. And the reason why I picked the Cessna 172N is the Cessna 172 I do fly is the Coronado Payware 172, and it has to be a 172N. I believe it's a 1979 model that they modeled it on. So, anyways, this checklist is okay. I've used it a couple times. Definitely gets the job done. So let's look. Like it says right here, V speeds. It's right here. You got VNE again. That is the never exceed speed. So at the top of the airspeed indicator, it will have a red line at 160. Notice that's faster than the 152. That's another thing with the 172. It can seat 4 people, up to 4 people, depending on weight, and you can go faster in it. So I definitely think that when I get my pilot's license, I like to fly the 172. The 152 I'm just doing because it's more economical, it's cheaper to rent by the hour, and it's comparable, you know, because they're both Cessnas. A couple different things. But anyways, let's continue with V speeds. We have VR. VR, this was not on the 152. Okay? VR is the rotation speed. So that's when you want to start pulling back on the yoke to get the nose up on a takeoff. That's the speed at which you want to do that. It's the best speed to get the takeoff going. In the Cessna 152, when I've done it in real life, I've actually started pulling back at 50. So that kind of tells you that you do have to look at the V speeds for different models. It's crucial for a pilot to remember that too. So if you're taking off, you have to know when to pull the yoke back. Again, when I was just doing flight simming, didn't have any lessons. I mean, I always heard rotate on the big jets, but I never really understood that, like what speed that was. I just thought, oh, they just call it out and then you start rotating by doing the yoke. So I had a little bit of an idea, but VR, important thing to know on each plane. VY again is the best rate of climb speed. So notice that in the Cessna 172, you want to go a little bit faster on this one, at least 73 knots to get it going on the best climb. And then once again, we have VX right here. VX says 60, and that's the best angle of climb. So again, if you have to clear trees, obstacles, you're on a short runway, you want to climb at 60 knots. Okay? All right. So, let's keep looking here. You got VFE, which is your flaps extended speed. 10 degrees you could start putting down at 110 knots, according to this, on the Cessna 172. You need to be at 85 knots for up to 40 degrees of flaps. So it's comparable to the 152, except that you can actually put 10 degrees down at 110 knots. VNO, again, is the maximum structural cruising speed. So that's the maximum speed you want to go for normal operations. Again, that should be the top of the green section in your indicator speed. You can go to the yellow, you can go past that, but that's in ideal weather conditions, no turbulence, no strong winds or anything like that. So VS is the next one. VS is the stall speed. So again, it's just the general stall speed at 41 knots. That's when the plane generally starts to stall. Okay. One thing we see on this checklist, right below VSO, it says best glide. It says 65 knots. That is a crucial thing to know. And the reason why is if you're in an emergency and your engine's not working, the first thing you want to get is you want to look at your airspeed and make it the best glide speed so that you can cover the most distance with a glide. Okay, so it's 65 knots on the 172. I believe, if I remember, just from my flight training, that the best glide speed for the 152 is 60 knots. So you definitely want to know that. And again, if you have a good checklist, you'll have all the emergency things, and it'll remind you cautionary landing with power, airspeed at 60. That's because it's best glide speed. Okay. All these things that you do, if you have any of these problems, you check the emergency checklist after you make sure your airspeed is good. Your airspeed is number one. Airspeeds for emergencies right here. Flaps up, flaps down, maneuvering speeds. Like, it's very important to know the glide speed, because that's going to give you the most time to figure out, after you get that airspeed there, to figure out where you're going to land this thing. So, airspeed's first, then best place to land, and then you're going to communicate everything out to air traffic control. We'll probably go over the emergency procedure later on. Going to probably go over the pre-solo test that I'm currently taking that provides you with all this information. Max crosswind is 15 knots. It depends on your piloting skills. Obviously, being a student pilot, I'm not going to do crosswind landings just yet, but we are going to get into them later. Okay, now VA is the last V speed they show here. VA stands for the design maneuvering speed, and if you notice, it depends on the load of the plane. Okay, so if your plane has a gross weight of 2,300 pounds, your maneuvering speed, your max maneuvering speed, or ideal, is 97 knots, and 1,950 pounds is 89 knots, and 1,600 pounds is 80 knots. These are things that you want to know, because again, you want to be able to control the plane the best way possible, or you want to understand why it might be running a little sluggish. So that's why, again, V-speeds are important to know. It's important for realistic flight, and also practicing that you know your V-speeds, basically. I mean, they could be on a checklist, but the reason why you train on one plane is to get used to the specifications of that plane, so that when you go on your check ride, you can answer all the questions like, hey, what's your best glide speed? Can you show me how to stall? You need to know what's going on. So again, this has just been a tutorial on V-speeds, their importance. And there's a lot more V-speeds on other checklists, by the way. I just wanted to stick with the 152, 172, with the general checklist that I use when I flight sim. When I'm at the flight school, they have their own checklist, so we follow that checklist, obviously. And but I mean, as far as flight sim, you could download a really nice checklist. I'll leave the 172 link checklist there too on the description, so you can actually have one for the 172. But I hope this helps with V-speeds, because I know I didn't understand everything totally about V-speeds when I was flight simming before I took lessons.